Start with land rent. What is that? How about this? Production minus wages and interest equals land rent.
Exactly.
Fair enough?
Yes.
Now, I would say not to be confused with the unearned income, which is what's left after taxes. That's what goes to the landowner, the unearned income. And the unearned income, what's left to the landowner, is what gets calculated into a selling price for land. Capitalized, we say, into the price of land.
I don't get the second one.
Land rent,
No, that's fine.
you don't get
Yes,
it, minus taxes.
All of that, land rent minus tax.
In other words,
Oh, I'm sorry.
production minus wages and interest is land rent. Land rent, thank you for
Oh,
stopping
now
there.
I-
Thank you for stopping there, but I guarantee you, now that's why I appreciate Ron
I
saying
didn't
that.
pass my
I mean, I
mind.
didn't want to just throw the script away, but I appreciate Ron saying that.
I didn't pass my math test.
And I guarantee if you didn't get it, 40% of the class didn't get it. I bet Allison would back me up,
So
but she's
it's like,
professional.
so it's all one equation. Okay, I got it.
So
It's a double.
land rent minus taxes equals what we call the unearned income.
Okay, got
And
it.
the unearned income is what the selling price is based on.
Yes. Now I got it.
Now, I know I'm going to fill this up, but there's where we're to start. And that's 14,000 square feet of land. Now, of course, we're going to put a building on it. And I assume that there's a certain amount of setbacks required from the street. And within the building, you're going to have hallways and utility room. But let's say that we can rent out 10,000 square feet of that building. That can generate income. Now, this building costs $1.5 million to build. And we can rent it for $12 a square foot. So that $12 times 10,000 is $120,000. And $1.5 million, and the current rate of interest is 5%, that will give us $75,000. Now I'm going to have to maintain this building so we don't lose the investment here. And if the maintenance and management were 3% of the building, that'd be $4.50 a square foot. $45,000. And what's left?
The difference. Zero.
Land rent, right? Now I want to put in a real estate tax, because everybody pays a real estate tax. But if you look at this map, you can see there is no standard or average real estate tax. If we go to Louisiana, it's about 1/10 of 1%. If we go to Texas, we got 1.8%.
No,
So you can
18.
18 bucks
Oh.
per thousand.
per thousand. Well, it would be 1.8. If there was ever an 18% real estate tax,
they were headed somewhere.
Serbia looked like the Boy Scouts, huh? I mean, Syria would look like the Boy Scouts. But 18%, per thousand, so 1.8%. And you notice that California with 12% unemployment, Alabama, West Virginia, and even the state of Delaware, although it's a lot higher than Louisiana, it's still in the lowest category. Then you get into the high areas like Texas, and I guess is Texas the very highest? Or, yeah, well, close. What state is that?
Minnesota.
Minnesota? So say that's high. Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Vermont, and New Hampshire. Where was the other one? Illinois? Is that?
It's 15. Kansas. Looks like John Lewis said.
Is that Illinois? Right here?
Yeah, the one that comes down.
Okay, so that's pretty high too, isn't it? All right, so you can see it's all over the place. So I just figured, well, I'm just going to make it 1.5%. And I have a feeling, New York City, of course, it has how many tax rates? Four. low-rise residential, high-rise residential, commercial, and utilities, which is kind of funny considering that the utilities are governed by the Public Utility Commission and they can't just charge with the market of air, another monopoly. But anyway, so I don't know, I'm not claiming that this is exactly right, but I think that, what do you think it is?
It depends on the class, I mean.
Well, I'm just saying an average.
That's a
Nationwide
little more
average.
than that, more like 2%.
Oh, higher than this? Well, that's good,
Yeah.
that's good. I just didn't want it to be way lower.
Yeah.
Okay, so, because I'd like to give this talk other places, you know,
It's
besides
a
New
little
York.
higher than that.
But anyway, let's just take 1.5%. Now, at $12 a square foot, we end up with nothing, right? In fact, Ricardo says the least productive land in use, well, the least productive land in use, that would be right there, wouldn't it? Because there is no land rent.
Yes. Right.
Now, but if I can get $14.20 out of this place, now, because of the greater income, I get $22,500. Land tax at 1.5%, uh-oh, $22,500. So again,
Back to zero.
land rent is zero.
Yep.
Now, and I should say, and the landowner gets nothing, because there ain't nothing to get.
Yep.
And so this is why I would say it added $2.20 per square foot to the lowest profitable price of floor space,
Yep.
$12 to $14 a square foot, or that would be $183 per month for 1,000 square foot, 1,000 a month apartment. So it's not insignificant. Now, I've got a really big building here, and what I want to know is which of these buildings would cost more to build? This one or this one? They're both exactly the same size.
Depends on the location.
Pardon me?
Depends on the location.
The location determines the cost of producing it.
Okay, no, not
The building itself.
The building
That one
itself.
would cost more.
This
This
costs
will
less.
cost more. Why would it cost more?
Less.
Building up vertical would be harder than building on the ground.
Because of,
Less.
Construction costs of actually labor
yeah.
and capital.
Well, I'm
You need more
agreeing with you, but I was hoping you
engineering.
would,
You need more material.
you not only need more material, you gotta put a big foundation on there, right? You gotta have
Extra.
anchor. Like a tree has to have a big root system. Well, that's what they gotta build, this gigantic root system or anchor. And then every floor above has to be supported. So, as you say, it takes a whole lot more girders and pillars and stuff to support it. All right, so here's our first floor, and we reinforce the walls, and we jack up the roof, and so on. Now, how many roofs does a building need? One. So would a two-story building be twice as much as a one-story building?
No.
No. So we got a savings there. But how about a 30-story? How many roofs does it need? One. So there's a one-time savings, right? From then on, it's the same every floor in terms of the roof.
Yeah.
We say we got a one-time savings. All right. So I'm going to say, forget the roof thing for the first floor. I'm going to try and make this as easy as I can and as conceptual as I can. So we'll just say that each additional floor costs 1% more to build than the previous one. So 3 times 1.5 would be 4.5, but this, because it costs more to build up, will be $4,545,100. Now we know the first floor merchants. Do they get to charge more per foot for their store than the upper floors? Way more, isn't it?
They want the access.
Yeah, for the street access. So we know that the first floor can charge more rent, and we know, what do we know about the view as it gets better and better?
That's better for residential.
Yeah, the views go up. I guess even office building, they may charge a little, these lawyers are willing to pay a little more for good view. But I just want to make it as simple as I can and say, let's assume that the same is paid for the use of floor space, every square foot. Now, we also know about when it comes to maintenance, that these elevators in high-rise are expensive and pretty efficient. So we know that maintenance is going to cost more in terms of the elevator than a low-rise building. And the window washers probably earn a lot more when they're doing 50 stories than 5 stories. But the girders and the reinforced steel that's holding this thing up, it doesn't cost any more to maintain it, does it? Or significantly more, I better say. So, just to make it simple, I've had the maintenance and management the same for all floor space at $4.50 a foot, which is 3% of what it costs to build the first story. To make the equation, I can complicate it, and then of course, nobody will. All right, so $12.50 a square foot. I build a 7-story building, $875,000 in income at $12.50. I pay the interest on the $10 million, $820,000 building, and the maintenance on the 70,000 square foot building, which is $315,000, and what's left is $18,985. Just to make sure, let's try an 8-story building. Uh-oh, I get $410 less by building another story. Why is that?
Diminishing returns.
Because it costs more to build it, therefore the return, in other words, the 5% interest on that higher amount that it costs for that extra story, but I'm only getting the same income per square foot as I do in all the others. So it gets less. So that's how we know that 7 stories at $12.50 is the highest we're going to get. But what about if I can go with $15? People are willing to pay me $15 a square foot. Now I got 34 stories. Oh, that's pretty good, isn't it? And I go through the same drill. The building costs $60 million. I get $5,100,000 in income and so on. And I get $550,000 in land rent. Well, just to make sure, I showed 35 stories, but because of the same thing, that putting that extra floor on, and it's probably, we ought to be talking about how much that extra floor on the bottom, you should jack that under there because that's the one that's got to be strong, and you get $194 less. So we're really confident that 34 stories is the highest and best use, the most profitable. Now we got to apply the real estate tax. Ooh, 8 stories? 8 stories, the income at $15 a square foot is $1,200,000. We subtract the interest on the $12 million building and the maintenance and management, and we get $218,575. We put a building tax, we subtract that, 1.5% of 12 million, and we get 186,000. And so after the building tax, 218,000, all the landowner gets is $32,147. And then we got to pay a land value tax because the real estate tax is on building and land. And so the building tax is $7,418, and the landowner in the unearned income gets $24,729. All right, now who's going to ask me how did you get the land tax? Where did I come up with that?
How'd you get it?
I don't know if anybody was just coasting here or you were thinking, what the hell? Well, here's how I came up with it.
Yeah, that's a new,
The unearned income was 24,000
yeah.
and capitalized at 5%. In other words,
Oh,
24,000
yeah, invested.
is 5% of 494,580. So selling price times 1.5% is 7,418 and value tax. Now, just to make sure that 8 stories is the most profitable height, I go to 9 stories, and for the same reason as before, you get $579 less. That's why we are so confident that 8 stories is right. If it's 1.5% real estate tax, if the current rate of interest is 5%, and if it costs, whatever it costs to build that building, $12,428,000. Now, at $15 a square foot, or 1.5% real estate tax collects 88% of the income from land. Can you imagine if somebody were proposing an 88% tax on anything? Smoot Hawley was only 54%. And so I know somebody's going to say, yeah, but most of that tax was on the building, not the land. It was, wasn't it? But I lend Marcial a building, and I say, this building costs $10 million. I want the current rate of interest, don't I? 5%. And if he says no, I say, never mind, I'll sell the building, and I'll lend out the money and get my 5%. So the landowner's going to have to eat that 1.5% on it. A tax on the building is paid out of land rent. And what does Mason Gaffney say? All taxes come out of rent. Yeah. It's the actor, the all-consuming theory of rent. And it makes that tax on buildings, which is paid out of land rent, makes 26 stories, 260,000 square foot of floor space unprofitable. Now, to counteract this, especially in times of recession, what does the Federal Reserve do with interest rates?
Lower interest.
They lower interest. So supposing we could get interest rates lowered from 5 to 3.5%.
Right.
Man, that's great. We can totally offset the real estate tax.
Yeah.
And here we are with 3.5% interest. We're back to 34 stories. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the city gets over $1 million, 905,798 plus 165,000. They got over $1 million in revenue. But who paid for it? Every sucker who's got money in a savings account, everybody who's owed money, everybody who's got bonds that are paying fixed dividends. You know, and look at who benefited. Now the unearned income is up to $385,000 from what was I say, 24,000 to 385? Oh boy. Well, every landowner would think this is only fair, isn't it? But at 5% interest, we're back to 8 stories. Now, what is the other help for new construction? At cities all over America, I doubt there's any city doesn't offer it. No taxes, and they call it tax abatement. Yep.
No taxes. Which is good.
Which is why the buildings are so high.
Amen.
There's no bottom.
Yeah. New buildings pay no taxes on the building for 2 years.
Yeah, good.
Then 20% of what they would otherwise pay for years 3 and 4, 40%, 5 and 6, 20% more every 2 years until the 10 years is up. Now in most cities it's 10 every 1 year they do 10%, but it's 10 years either way.
Good.
20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% 20% And I believe the expectation is that the amount people pay for floor space is that it will increase over the years. So as the taxes go up, the amount they can charge for the place will go up, and in time, they'll get their money. Now, I got to thinking about that as I was getting ready for tonight, and I thought, yeah, that's a hell of a 10% a year, that's a pretty damn big raise in rent. So I don't say they always get it. In fact, probably most of the time they don't quite get the 10%, but they certainly, rents have gone up. And when they don't, a lot of these people go bankrupt, don't they?
Well, but inflation also makes. it
And
more
inflation
valuable.
offsets it too, yes. So, and the assessment is based on what it was before. So, they don't reassess the land with the tax abatement. So all they're paying is $7,418 in taxes, at least for the first year.
Because it's based on the land value.
Based on the land
Not
value
the building.
with the potential to put 8 stories on.
Right,
That's when
right.
the assessment was made, see?
Oh.
But now we got the tax abatement, now they got 34 stories, but they're still paying taxes on the
Right.
old assessment of land and no tax on the building for the first 2 years.
Right.
So the first year, the city gets a lot less revenue than they would if the 8-story building was there. But they get the same amount of revenue as they would have gotten with a vacant lot, which in a lot of cases, that's what we're talking about, a vacant lot as opposed to a building. And they get a lot more jobs and a lot more housing, or one or the other. And after the first year, or in this case, the first 2 years, they start getting more revenue than they did before. And in 10 years, they get the full amount.
Do they get more housing, or they just get more expensive housing?
No, they get the more buildings that they wouldn't have gotten if they hadn't given the exemption.
Because.
It's the argument. I don't say that's the reality. You may well be right about the reality, but I'm just saying that's the argument. That, well, without the tax exemption, we're not going to build.
Yeah, but with the tax exemption, all of that capital gets privatized. They can increase the price of the apartments because they're not, the people who live in them won't have to pay property tax for very little property.
Oh, yeah, but it's only for 10 years. But yeah, and we saw that article that you sent around. Yeah. And then the people who paid, what was it, $5 million were complaining about a $500 a month tax bill. Oh my! They weren't complaining about the $5 million that they paid for the place, but the $500 a month, that's outrageous. I see it in art. I can't afford this land rent. We're paying here. I go, well, what's your mortgage payment? What's that got to do with it? That's my private business. Now, here's where we are without the taxes. On the other hand, if we're willing to pay 20% more, if somehow the value goes up to $18.10, oh, we got 34 stories, everything is fine. The city's getting plenty of revenue, another $1 million in revenue, and the landowner's getting his $537,500 income from the land. But comparing apples to apples, at $15 a square foot, without all the subsidies, we're back to 8 stories. Now, enter the Georges. Before we started with the taxes, that 34-story building at $15 a square foot yielded a gross land rent of $550,673, right? So if we had a 50% land value tax, 50% of the rental value of land or 50% of the potential rent, however you want to say it, that would mean that the city gets $275,000 in revenue. The city gets all this floor space, 34 stories of floor space, and at 50%, look what's left for the landowner, $275,000. So from $24,729 to, whatever I just said, to $275,000. The city actually gets a little bit more revenue from $193,800 46 to 275,000. The city gets $81,000, $81,490 more in revenue, and 26,000 square feet of additional floor space for people to either live or work in. Now, maybe you'd say, well, with more people, bigger buildings, the city needs a little bit more money. Okay, maybe. But I think the important thing here is that we can have a compact city, far more efficient, where the infrastructure and the public services are economized. And not only are we getting all of this additional space to live and to work in, but the unearned income goes from $24,729 to $275,000. So, without a doubt, the landowners are the biggest winners with this partial shift to land value taxation. Look at the selling price. With the 8 stories, and the selling price at 5%, in other words, $24,729 is 5% of $494,571. Just say $500,000. But $275,000 is 5% of $5,506,000. 11 times the price that it was before.
And this is based on 1 year, right?
1 year, yeah.
So-
Oh, that's a selling price. It would be-
Times,
But based on the 1 year's income, right. And so not only does the landowner get that 11 times what he had before, but if he chooses to leave the land idle, empty, under the present 1.5% tax, he pays $7,418. Under the land value tax at 50%, that vacant lot pays $275,000 in taxes, a 361% increase. And another way to say it would be, if he leaves that land idle,
Right.
it only has to increase in selling value by 1.5% with the current system. But under the land tax, it has to increase by 5% every year, or it costs him money. He doesn't even break even. And this is what people expect New York to look like in the coming years. A few more. I don't know when that building's supposed to be built, but with LVT, we believe that New York or any city that adopted it would look much more like this. And this is a city which actually has some degree of land value taxation.